New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring.
What if the person you think you are is just a fraction of who you truly are? What if years of conditioning and surviving in a challenging world have left you clinging to strategies and beliefs that mask your truest nature? I'm Catherine Duca, psychotherapist and self-esteem coach, and you're listening to Who Do You Think You Are? A show that looks beneath our psychological masks and uncovers our profoundly messy, beautiful, brilliant, tender-hearted essence. Join me as we go in search of the hidden power of our true selves. I'm so glad you're here. And if you've been listening, you know that I am so glad you're here. Welcome, everyone. You're listening to Who Do You Think You Are? I'm your host, Catherine Duca, psychotherapist and self-esteem coach. And this show is dedicated to helping you learn how to have the highest regard for yourself always, how to live from a place of self-respect and self-love, and how to make yourself a priority in your own life. Meet me here each week for curated tips and strategies that are designed to help you drop your psychological masks, connect with your truest essence, and simply live life more easily. Because we know that when we approach life from this inner place, we naturally and effortlessly have more room, more generosity, more patience, and more love for others. And isn't that what this world needs now more than anything? So welcome, self-love builders, confidence builders, wide receivers, all of you who have been tuning into this show because you want to cultivate and deepen your relationship with yourself. And you want to have a clear mind. You want to be clear-headed, as we say here on Who Do You Think You Are? Avoidant, passive, histrionic, self-absorbed, detached, foggy minds, right, will do very little to comfort anyone. So this show is all about clarity of mind, peace of heart, and a calm inner space. Tonight's show has a couple of different titles. I think the title that you might have tuned into is In Whom Can I Trust? In whom can I trust? But really, someone read my newsletter this morning, which is based on the same topic, and said, well, this is really like majoring in self-trust. And I said, yes, it really is like majoring in self-trust. So that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. In a world, in a country that seems to be so full of mistrust and distrust, a question we must ask ourselves is, in whom can I place my trust? You know, time and time again, we say here that no one is coming to save us. No one is coming to rescue us. So if we thought that was going to happen, I think that dream has long since died. And friends, we all know. We all know, and if you're listeners of this station, certainly New Thought Media Network, and this show, you know that we understand it is up to each of us in our clarity of mind and peace of heart to be the torchbearers of trust. So I want to begin this show, this conversation. And please, if you're listening and you have access to the chat, I invite you to join, ask a question, make a comment, agree, disagree. I'd love your input. So don't be shy. But if you are shy, you can certainly email me your question and I'll get it during the break. Email me at Catherine@CatherineDuca.com. That's Catherine@CatherineDuca.com. And I'll read it during the break and see if I can answer it. So I want to begin with an anecdote. And it has to do with when I was writing my book. So a few years ago, in 2021, I wrote a book. It's called Unmasked: Discover the Hidden Powers of Your True Self. I just call it Unmasked. And when I was writing it, I have to say, I spent a lot of time overworking, overthinking, overanalyzing, over editing, over everything, overdoing it. And I have to say, I felt very tight around my creativity. Am I expressing this, in the best way, in the right way? I think that was another way of saying in the most perfect way. So each time I created a new version, I sent it out to a couple of trusted colleagues, smart, generous, insightful colleagues. And I asked for their advice and their direction, and they happily offered it. I wanted to know, was it interesting enough? Was it clear enough? Was it creative enough? Did I put the humorous stuff in all the right spots? Please tell me, please. And each and every time they came back with their valuable and very thoughtful feedback, I became a little more lost, a little less sure of myself, a little less sure of my ideas. I have to say, a little less sure of myself. And it's not that I had a hard time accepting constructive criticism, because I didn't and I don't. It was more the opposite problem. I was too quick to incorporate their suggestions and their ideas, too eager to please, I think, too willing to change my own style in order to get, I realize in retrospect, the right response from my colleagues. So you can imagine how that knotted me up, right? I became more tense, and I really began to doubt myself. And what I finally had to do, I reached the point where I was so constricted that I couldn't create. And I finally had to, I talked with one or two trusted people, and I shared this. And I realized as I was talking that what I had to do for myself was I had to be willing to make a mistake, or get something, not quite right. I had to be willing to be somewhat dissatisfied with what I was creating, because the alternative was getting very, very uncomfortable. So if any of you listening share a similar experience, if you find that you get, even though you may not want to, but you find that you get hung up on other people's opinions. And incidentally, what's the new thing now? There's FOMO, right? Fear of missing out. And there's FOPO, fear of other people's opinions, right? So, I mean, between all the foes, we're going to do ourselves in here. So back to me, and what I had to do was, I realized that I had to be willing to make a little bit of a mess. Now, I knew I wasn't going to make a catastrophe, but I had to be willing to be a little less perfect, and maybe even reading it back, maybe even the tiniest bit regretful of phrasing something. When you write a book, you automatically become, even if you don't start out this way, you become a bit of a wordsmith. And most people I know who've authored books labor over phrases and participles and they don't want to leave anything dangling. And it's a very, very tedious process. And yes, you have editors to help you out. But if you're like me, you are so hung up that you edit as you go, which is what I did. And that was a big no-no. So if any of you suffer from the same affliction and want to join me in recovery, then I think this conversation could be of interest to you. So self-trust. Now, why is self-trust so important? Well, I think you know the obvious reasons for that. But the reason self-trust matters and matters a lot is because in our development, it is the most basic tier of our psychological and emotional growth. Trust versus mistrust. If you're a fan of I think it's Erickson's stages of development, from birth to, I don't remember if it's a year or a year and something. Trust versus mistrust is the most important step that an infant must negotiate, right? And the infant negotiates this step based purely on how the caregivers respond to the infant's needs. And although I'm not going to get very deep into this, you know that if the caregiver overindulges the infant's needs, that the baby's going to probably grow to be one way. I mean, I'm oversimplifying, but you get the idea. If the caregivers are delayed in responding, or much worse, if they are indifferent about responding or unable to respond because of health challenges or addiction or something like that, the infant is going to grow into a person with certain other challenges. So we learn about whether we can trust ourselves, whether we can rely on ourselves, whether we feel secure within ourselves, based right out of the gate from how the people who are caring for us and raising us respond to our needs. Now, as we grow up, many of us, of course, spend our lives listening to these caregivers, our parents, our teachers, our leaders even, and we choose what they may tell us to choose. We are told gently or otherwise who we are, and we accommodate. We become who we are told we are. We mold ourselves to the feedback of others, don't we? We seek approval from others. We reach for recognition, right? Because we all want to be seen and heard. And as of course you know, to an infant, to a child, to a growing child, approving caregivers and approving adults are really the name of the game. It is how we feel loved. It's how we feel cared for. It's how we feel connected. It's how we feel connected. Now, there is a very good reason to learn from the wisdom of others, but we want to be aware of the cost. Now, I'm talking about as adults. So whatever happened to get us to perhaps a lack of self-trust, whatever happened or didn't happen to bring us to that point, it is up to each of us now. It is up to our adult wisdom and determination and insight to shape ourselves according to our own terms. There comes a point in our lives where we need to do that. We need to do that. And I talk to a lot of parents in my practice, and very loving, devoted parents who tell me that they do a lot for their children, and nothing wrong with that, but in certain cases, perhaps too much. And my response to that is, first of all, why do you do that? Well, I do that because Nobody did that for me. And I want to protect my children. I want to protect them. I want to protect them from the harshness of life. I want to protect them from making big mistakes. I want to guide them and I want to support them. And of course, that's wonderful. Of course, that's wonderful. But I add to that, well, gee, I hope you're planning on living forever. I hope you're planning on living forever because your children may need you around forever if they've come to depend on you for solving all of their problems. And often the well-meaning parent to whom I'm speaking takes a pause and reflects on that. Because really, what we want to leave our children is the innate ability to be able to handle their lives, to be able to trust themselves. Because when we don't trust ourselves, as we said, we do what I did in matters large and small, right? How many of you, when you can't make a decision, you start taking surveys, you start polling people, asking them what they think, asking them what you should do? I know someone who used to ask her husband, do I like this wine? You know, she's never had a wine. She didn't know what to choose. Can you tell me what wine I like? Now, maybe she did that with some, note of humor. But the point is, if we don't take the time and the trouble to reach into the part of ourselves that holds our wisdom and our intuition and our inner guidance, then we're going to be dependent on outside influences to tell us what to do. And you know what that does? That might feel okay in a pinch. That might feel satisfying in the short term. But actually what it does is it leaves a kind of desperation aftertaste. Because if you can't get a hold of someone who can tell you what to do, one can feel, I've certainly experienced this, you can feel kind of frenetic. You can kind of scramble for somebody, please tell me, somebody, please tell me. Not a good way to feel, not a good way to go, right? So we owe it to ourselves, and I think we owe it to other people. I'd be very interested to know what you all think about that. I think we owe it to other people to love ourselves, to trust ourselves, to take care of ourselves. Why? Because we're more grounded human beings. Because, frankly, we're less needy, less graspy, probably less annoying, speaking for myself, human beings. And when we, and I say this often, and I'll continue to say it, when we embrace this part of ourselves, without saying a word, we naturally give other people permission to do the same thing. If you set a boundary, you naturally transmit to the other person that it's okay for them to set a boundary with you. If you say no to someone, you automatically give them the idea, the vibe that they can say no to you. And when you trust yourself, you likewise convey a quiet encouragement that they can trust themselves. Does this mean we don't have spirited discussions and energized conversations and maybe disagree strongly? No, of course not. It has nothing to do with that. It's about walking life grounded in the knowledge that you are a divine human being, that you have unlimited potential within, that you know what's going on and or can educate yourself as to what's going on. And you can walk this earth with a certain knowingness that you're allowed to take up the space that you take up. And so is everyone else. So this self-trust is an important thing. It's the bottommost tier of our psychological and emotional development upon which all the other tiers rest. So if this imagine like a staircase. If the bottom stair is a little wonky, how is it going to support the rigors and the responsibility and the weight of adulthood? So anyone listening who's having some difficulty trusting themselves, we have to get to the bottom tier, which is to say, go in and ask yourself, did I get enough of this from my parents? Now, this is not to blame anybody. This is not to indict any parent. The overwhelming majority of parents did the best they could with what they had, most often trying to make up and swinging the pendulum to compensate for what they didn't receive from their parents. So a lot of parents, and hence a lot of people, operate on the extremes. And of course, the best place to be is in that wide mid-range, right? So, okay, I think you get the idea. Now, I'm seeing some comments in the chat. I'm going to turn and see. Hello, Wayne. Good to see you. Hello. Welcome. Leandra, welcome. Yes, you've experienced fear of fear of people's opinions. I think that is, right? Fear of people's opinions. Right. Well, who hasn't? But of course, it's a matter of degree, and we want to go in and work with ourselves. Just Judy, Duca, you're a clear, witty, insightful, helpful writer. Always trust yourself as a writer. Okay, I'll take that, Just Judy. I'll take that. You're a clear, witty, insightful, help. Well, you know what? I thank you for that. And have I used this analogy before on the show? I was always fascinated by trapeze artists. How in the world, especially the ones without a net, how in the world can they let go of the one bar or the other trapeze artist? How can they let go and be suspended, not holding on to anything for a second before they catch on to the other bar or the other person's hand? That split second of letting go, that's of course where our amygdalas, go on high alert. And that's where the fear comes in. What's going to happen to me? Am I going to fall? What are people going to think? We have to track that line of questioning with FOPO. What am I afraid they're going to think? And if they think that, and they may, I'm not a person to say people don't judge. Oh, don't worry, they're not judging you. I'm the first to say, oh, they probably are judging you, probably like you judge, or speaking for myself, like I judge, though I try not to, but I do. But I do more often than I'd like to. So I'm working on it. But after you say, well, I'm afraid they're going to think I'm this, then ask yourself, and then, well, then, XYZ. Okay. And then what's the worst that will happen? What's the worst that will happen? So try to take that line of thinking all the way out to the logical conclusion, the worst case scenario, and see if you can listen to what that is. And then you can challenge, well, is that really, is that founded? Is that warranted? Is that likely to happen? I talk to many people who, let's say, for example, I had a conversation, in the recent past with someone who is, I think, by most standards in the New York metro area, you would consider her very financially comfortable, invested well. So, is looking at a future and is, well, I don't know, as of last week. Okay, that's another story. But by and large is doing very okay. She feels she is one mistake away. I call it a banana peel. One banana peel away from being, this is what she says, homeless and living, under an overpass. And she really believes that. Now, intellectually, she knows that's not true. But our intellect does not really run the show. It's what we believe from the neck down. That's what runs the show. And so she's terrified. And so she's been in a toxic job for way too long, and it's making her sick, literally literally sick, to say nothing of emotionally upset all the time. Now, that belief, I'm one banana peel away from being homeless, that's probably, and when I say probably, extremely, extremely unfathomably unlikely to happen. So we have to explore, where does that notion come from? So we have to unpack, we have to ask questions. And as I said last week, you have to ask one more question. When you answer that question, what's underneath that? When you get there, what's underneath that? Right? You get the idea. Okay. Leandra, I no longer ask others what to do in making major decisions. Okay. What do you do instead? I assume you just rely on your own intuition, wisdom, intellect, and go from there. Tell me if I'm warm, Leandra. Okay. Let's see. Michelle is saying to Leandra, yes, great space to be in. Yes. Hi, Michelle. Welcome. Janine, good evening. Good to see you. It's fine to seek input and support from others. Yes, it is. But we forget that we can take what we want that is offered to us and leave the rest. This is part of the self-trust process. Yes, this is making, I'm glad you brought that up, Janine. This is making the best use of feedback. Now, in my case, I was so afraid of making a mistake that if someone made a suggestion, I kind of swallowed it in one gulp and tried, even if it was a bit of a square peg, I tried to work it in to my existing writing, and it didn't work, but that didn't stop me from ruminating and efforting nonetheless. And I think what Janine is offering is a much better suggestion. Take what feels right, take what feels naturally congruent with your own ideas, your own thinking, and then leave the rest. Leave the rest. And as you incorporate that, and as you try it on, your own self-trust gauge will speak to you. Your body will speak to you the way my body felt constricted and tight. And when I got over that, by being willing to, I'll call it, make a mistake, when I got over that, I relaxed. And then I was able, first of all, my prefrontal cortex that part of my brain came back online, because when you're in fight or flight, that goes offline. So that came back, and then I could be creative. So take the best and leave the rest, right? Thank you. Patricia, good evening. Welcome. I trust myself and will usually go with that, but I sure do love to know what others think. A major polar here. Okay. My go-to is, what would you do if you were me? Well, again, I'm kind of smiling because that's a question that I've asked my doctors. Well, if in any given case, if this were you, doctor, what would you do? So I relate to that this way. Well, Patricia, you have to see if you're polling for interest and curiosity, or if it's a what shall we call it? Where's your come from place? Try to gauge that. Curiosity and interest, or a little, I'll call it maybe insecurity, maybe for myself, insecurity or doubtfulness. Not a crime, because all of this is a matter of degree, right? If you're paralyzed, if you can't think, if you're frozen on a fairly consistent basis when you have to make decisions, then that's a pretty high degree. If it's a little bit now and again, and you're interested in what people think, okay, I think that's something else. Okay. Leandra, yes, you're right. I look inward. I trust my inner guidance from my source. Yeah, of course. Of course. The thing about worry, anxiety, and fear, all human emotions, is that it kind of blocks us it makes us a little congested, doesn't it? Emotionally or spiritually congested. We're less plugged in to source. So when that happens, I think it's difficult to access and to allow the divine message to come through. So hopefully, if not for anything else, perhaps this conversation is something you can reflect on, catch yourself in real time, say, oh, I know what I'm doing. I think I'm doing that thing where I'm polling and I'm looking outward. Let me take a step back and let me see if I can drop down into my own willingness to be imperfect with the task, because I think that's much more likely to allow us to tap in to our perfection, actually. And you know what I mean by perfection, spiritual perfection. You know what I mean? Allowing the divine teacher, the divine physician, the divine everything to come to us and flow through us. So I think this is one way in which we can work with ourselves. Okay, we've been at this a while. This is a good time to take a break. Let's do that. We'll take a short intermission. And when we come back, we'll talk about what lack of self-trust sounds like in our heads and how we can turn that around and have a different kind of inner monologue or dialogue. Stay with me. You're listening to Who Do You Think You Are on New Thought Media Network. I'll be right back.
You know, I've been thinking, this volunteer dinner deserves a standout video, something with real impact. But hiring a big production team for just one video? The cost would be huge.
I get it. But have you thought about New Thought Media Network? They do amazing work beyond just broadcast programming on YouTube. They actually specialize in high-quality, one-off productions for events like ours. And I heard they're super affordable.
Really? I didn't realize they did that. So they focus on quality without the premium price tag.
Exactly. Plus, Dr. Robert runs the whole thing, and he's all about making great media accessible. We could get the professional look we need without going overboard on costs.
His sounds perfect. Let's get in touch with Dr. Robert and see if they can work their magic for us.
Well, hello again, dear ones. Dr. Robert here from New Thought Media Network. We'd love to work with you on a custom video for your next event or project. From impactful storytelling to creating a unique avatar for your community or brand, we're here to bring your vision to life, affordably and professionally. Reach out and let's explore what we can create together. Please help us say thank you to our organizational sponsors, including the Hefferland Foundation, Affiliated New Thought Network, International New Thought Alliance, Science of Mind Archives and Library Foundation, Center for Spiritual Living Denver, Center for Spiritual Living Midtown, New Thought Philadelphia, Planned Happiness Institute, Summit Center for Spiritual Living, One Heart Retreats, Center for Spiritual Living on the Lake, Unity Kitchener, Unity Spiritual Center Ottawa, Om Center for Spiritual Living, Satya Center, Begin Within Ministries, Center for Spiritual Living North Jersey, Unity of Savannah, and the Center for Spiritual Living Seattle, as well as all of our individual donors. Thank you for being part of the New Thought Media Network. Please like, share, and subscribe. New Thought Media Network, positively inspiring.
We're back. Okay. Sorry about that. Welcome. If you just joined us, You saw me space out there for a second. We are talking about self-trust and what it's like when we don't have enough self-trust. And I'm going to be talking about what it's like when we start to turn that around. I noticed that I missed a couple of comments, and I just want to go back. Janine said that I've even had a therapist tell me, take what you want of what we discuss here, use what works for you. You can reject anything that doesn't. I think that's excellent advice. Hey, listen, just because a therapist says it, it doesn't mean, it has to resonate with the client, of course. Good, Janine. And I think I saw Dawn before. I think Dawn had an earlier comment. Such an important point. What was an important point? That trust is the first tier of early healthy development. Yes. And the first tier of being able to build a healthy relationship as an adult. Yes, it is. If you think of it as that staircase, self-trust, which then, of course, later on leads to trust in others, is the most basic developmental stage. And as with each of the stages, the degree to which we do or do not negotiate that step well will have a bearing on how we deal with the next step, because you can't make up for an early step with a later step, so maybe some evening I'll go into all those steps, because it's really pretty interesting. But if you don't have adequate self-trust, you really can't compensate for it. You have to go in and try to develop self-trust and really try to address the gaps in your development. Okay, so that's a good segue into where we're going, because most of us talk to ourselves in our heads, don't we? We have these internal conversations with ourselves. We have usually, or often, most of us have an inner critic, right? I call it an inner drill sergeant. And I think on the extremes exists the drill sergeant kind of voice, and then the voice of the kind, gentle kindergarten teacher, right? If you were 5 again, don't you want your kindergarten teacher to speak to you in a kind of a sweet, melodic voice, and, be very gentle and sweet? Of course. Okay. All the while, of course, setting limits and teaching whatever he or she has to teach. But, so when we are not trusting ourselves, I think the inner dialogue sounds a little punitive, and, dare I say, harsh, and maybe even insulting. Some of my clients, trust me enough to share some of what they say to themselves in their heads. And I'll tell you, it's often not only harsh, but sometimes it borders on cruel and such name calling. Think about that. Think about that. Would you speak to a child that way? Would you speak to a dear friend that way? The answer is, of course not. But we think we can treat ourselves like a punching bag of sort. So instead of what a jerk I am, how could I be so stupid? How could I have missed that? What's wrong with me? When am I going to grow up? When am I going to do it right? You could say something like, I know this is challenging right now, but I think I can handle it. It may take some time and practice, but I can land on my feet. I'm unsure of my next step, but I'm willing to ask for support. Okay. By tuning in and listening to our inner voice, we can begin to exorcise our critical voice, and in its place, welcome a more encouraging, supportive, and affirming way of speaking to ourselves. This is not going to happen by itself. I don't think any of us, wakes up in the morning and is different in this regard. We have to, or at least we have the opportunity to apply these methods, these techniques to our challenges or to our difficulties and work them through. But I consider this delicious work. I'd love to know what you think. Now, we can move from self-talk that is punitive, harsh, critical, demanding, and insulting to self-talk that is encouraging. And that might sound like, well, I've done this before, or I've been here before, and ... and it wasn't so bad, or it turned out okay. This conveys to ourselves, instead of conveying to ourselves and reinforcing to ourselves what a mess up we are. In this instance, we convey a sense of confidence and capability. You're not being, what would be the word? You're not being false with yourself, because I don't really think that works. That's why affirmations, I think, kind of cut both ways. They can be inspiring, but if we don't believe the affirmation on an energetic or emotional level, we will just reject it. So no matter how lovely it is, and we can put it on our mirror, it's not going to feel congruent with what we really feel. But this, I think, this statement is more a reminder. I've done this before and it turned out okay. I can handle this. Because maybe you've asked the question and the worst case scenario you come to find out isn't so bad. Okay, I can deal with this. I can get support. I can ask a question. I can take XYZ action. But I can handle this outcome. That conveys to our own brain a feeling of resilience and adaptability. I trust my instincts. Same thing. It conveys a sense of faith in one's own intuition. So that was self-talk that is encouraging. Kindergarten teacher. Now, self-talk can also be reflective. I think this is important. What can I learn from this experience? What can I learn? Not, this is terrible. Like, it's going to last forever. I'm frozen in this moment in time. No, life is dynamic. What can I learn from this experience? This focuses on growth and self-improvement. What are my legitimate strengths and weaknesses? This is a willingness to work with our limitations while neither embellishing them nor devaluing our strengths. Okay? We want to be realistic. We want to be, when you bring a gem, a diamond, let's say, to the jeweler. The jeweler has that eyepiece. What's it called? I'm not remembering what's it called. Is it an ocular? Not sure. Somebody tell me. But looks at the diamond, and if that jeweler is trustworthy, will give you an honest appraisal of the clarity, the color, the cut, so on and so forth. And will say, yeah, this is a beautiful diamond. I see a flaw here. I see a bit of yellowing here. But, the diamond is still beautiful. So you want to have a realistic appraisal of your own strengths and weaknesses, and go in and challenge your limitations, and don't overblow them, nor should we devalue or undervalue our strengths. Let's not tamper with them. Let's just let them be what they are. All right. Another self-reflective question: what are my values and priorities? What are my values and priorities? This strengthens our sense of autonomy and independence. It brings a sense of clarity and direction. What are my values? Because I think one of the most important things we can do, and this is integral, part and parcel with self-trust, is know our values. And I think that's an interesting exercise to go through. which is, what do I really believe in? What are the values that I learned, but that no one gave me, in that no one can take them away? So we can learn something, right? We either learn to be self-critical or we learn to be more self-accepting. But then once we learn that, it's a part of ourselves. So when it comes to values, we want to articulate what our core beliefs are when it comes to our values, and do all we can to live from that place. When we get into people pleasing, when we wear all manner of masks, we are camouflaging our true values, and we're living according to other people's values and other people's expectations. And then we get further and further away from ourselves, and we become almost estranged from ourselves. How can you trust someone you don't really know? And that's the relationship many of us end up having with ourselves. We don't really know who we are in a deep way. And so we can't trust ourselves. And then we do the next best thing. We start asking around. We ask around for who we are. And people are happy to tell us. And then we try to wear that. And you can see where that leads. Further and further away from who we are. Okay, self-talk that is validating. I'm doing my best. If that's true, then that's your self-validating statement. I'm doing my best. This fosters a sense of self-acceptance and self-compassion. I am worthy of trust and respect, mostly my own, I would say. I'm worthy of trust and respect. This brings a sense of self-worth and self-respect, obviously. I am worthy of trust and respect. I can make mistakes and still be okay. I can make mistakes and still be okay. I can make mistakes and still be a worthwhile human being, a worthy human being, a deserving human being, a loving and lovable human being. You know? In spite of, and maybe even because of my flaws. And I submit the same. The same for you. Okay? Self-talk that aids in decision-making. Okay, what are my options here? Now, this is a good time to mention, when we get scrambly, asking people what we should do because we can't make a decision, scrambly, graspy, kind of desperate, we get so tight, as I said before, and so paralyzed, afraid to make a mistake. Now, I think there's two types of mistakes that we make. One, I think, is a calm mistake. And a calm mistake is when we ask ourselves, for example, what are my options here? What feels right for me now? I can make a decision now and then adjust or change course if necessary. So if you ask these questions and take this approach, and you find out, okay, it's not necessarily a home run, all right? You've made what I'm calling a calm or a reasoned mistake, if you want to use that word, as opposed to a more frenetic mistake. When we're scrambling and we're texting people to ask them their opinion and we can't reach them, and maybe there's a deadline, and so we just jump in and just say, okay, I'll do that. Then we make a decision because we're up against the wall, maybe with a deadline or something, and then it doesn't work out. Then what happens? Enter blame, enter more criticism. We just pile on the self-defeat. And then the mountain of lack of trust, the mountain of criticism, of judgment only gets higher. So if we're going to make mistakes, and we are, and we will, and every day until forever and ever, I think if we ask ourselves these reasonable questions, what are my options? What feels right for me now? And if I make this choice, and it doesn't work out, can I make an adjustment later on? Can I come back and revisit this? And this is true of actual decisions. This is true of difficult conversations. A conversation may get to a certain point, and then maybe there's a bit of an impasse or things get tough. Hey, let's take a break and revisit this later on. Very, very few things are, some are, but relatively few are irrevocable, written in stone, can never be revisited. Okay. Of course, some are. Okay, so let me check the chat. How are we doing? Okay. I imagine everyone's absorbing. All right. I hope this is clear. Let me know if I'm coming through, if this is making sense. A quick rundown again of the things that contribute to negative self-talk: childhood experiences, trauma, neglect, overly critical or harsh parenting, that can erode our sense of autonomy and self-respect, negative self-talk from parents, fear of failure, getting punished for making a mistake, being given perhaps too much external validation and not having enough room for self-evaluation as a growing person. These are some of the things that can bring us to a lack of self-trust as an adult. So what to do? Well, I've mentioned a few things. To recap: practice self-reflection. Practice self-reflection. Take time to reflect on your thoughts, your feelings, your actions. Be more curious about yourself and less judgy. Gee, why did I do that? Why did I do that? Not pointing a finger, but more with an energy of, let me understand my own reaction a little better. Where was that coming from? And of course, cultivating self-compassion. That's a constant. Try to listen to your instincts. Try to trust them. Pay attention to your gut feelings and your intuition. Tune in more. Block out a little less. And take small risks. Start with small, low-stake decisions and gradually work your way up to maybe slightly bigger ones. Do more experimenting and less avoiding. And I always say, go where the love is. Start with the people whom you feel the safest with. Someone you know isn't going to judge you. And say, listen, I'm not looking for you to solve this, but there's something on my mind. Can I tell you about it? And can you just listen? And then if you're interested in their thoughts, and just tell me how this lands with you. Tell me what your impressions are. And then, of course, always using that barometer that Janine has talked about. Take what fits, take the best, the most relevant, and leave the rest. So, self-trust. It is the foundation, the first and most important tier that we have in our development. The stronger we become in our ability to trust ourselves, the better able we are to handle the rigors, the challenges, the weight of adulthood. And I think the more we're able to do this, the more emotionally freer we are to enjoy life, to see the beauty in it, and to know that each of us is an integral part of what makes life worth living. And none of us has cornered the market on these things. We are all spiritual beings having this one human experience, which is messy and, messy and awkward and beautiful and tender and harsh and cruel and amazing and joyful and miraculous and confounding and dynamic and living and breathing and changing life. And to be in the flow of life is to know that and understand that, I think, and to appreciate that. So all of this and all of these conversations, I believe, have to do with not so much getting things right, but being in the flow, being a participant, being a curious evaluator of ourselves and circumstances, and being clear-headed. And when we do that, I think we're nicer human beings. I think we're more capable human beings. And I think we're more loving human beings. So that just about concludes this talk on self-trust. I hope you found it helpful. Incidentally, this is a two-part series, if you will, on self-trust. Next week, I'm going to be talking a little bit more about it and interviewing a special guest. You know how we say, well, I didn't write the book on self-trust. Well, I'm going to be interviewing someone who actually did. New York Times bestselling author Tama Keeves is going to be joining me next week, and she will impart a ton of wisdom, and she's a wonderful, beautiful human being and a light in this world, and I don't think you'll want to miss her being on the show next week. So tune in for Majoring in Self-Trust Part 2. All right, dear ones, self-love builders, confidence builders, wide receivers, all of you, know that you are loved and you are love. And I think of each of you all during the week, and I hope you think of each other. Thank you for being here. You honor me by letting me into your earbuds, and I wish you well. Get a good night's rest tonight. Leave the conflicts for the morning. They'll be there. Just drift off, knowing that you are that diamond. You've been listening to Catherine Duca on Who Do You Think You Are on New Thought Media Network. Take good care and good night.